Imagine that you have been traveling for a long time, like a really long time. Multiple connections, endless delays, days of travel with no rest, one aggravation after another. Perhaps it's not so hard to imagine. I know last week was one of the busiest travel weeks of the year. Hopefully that's not too familiar to too many of you too recently. But then finally, you find a moment of respite. The journey might not be over yet, but maybe it's the right neck pillow or just enough of a reclining seat in coach or a hotel with a surprisingly comfortable bed. And you're able to drift off to get some much needed rest. You wake up refreshed and perhaps a bit astonished at how deep the sleep was, how vivid your dreams were, and with maybe an abiding sense of hope and promise buried in the message of those dreams. In our Torah portion this week, this is exactly where we find our patriarch Jacob. The Parsha Vayetze, he left, picks up as Jacob leaves his home in Beersheba and sets out to find a wife in Haran, as his father instructed him. But as we know, Jacob isn't just leaving, he's really fleeing, fearful for his life after stealing his father's blessing from his older brother Esau. And while yes, Jacob is going towards something, a new life, a search for a wife, as instructed by his father and mother, he's also very much running away from the retribution for the deception that he and his mother perpetrated against Esau. But in the midst of this journey, Jacob has a number of powerful experiences that fundamentally change him from the young, naive trickster into someone who has experienced a bit more of life, learns some hard-won lessons, and emerges from this next chapter of his life a changed man. Over the span of a few decades, he goes from Jacob the trickster to Israel, the one who wrestles with the divine, a true patriarch of the Jewish people. But this week's Torah portion gives us a glimpse into the very beginnings of that transformation. We don't learn how long he's been traveling or how long he's been traveling for when he finally decides to stop and rest. But there are some clues that it's been a bit of a long, arduous journey. He takes a stone from the place he decides to stop for the night and uses it as a pillow. Sound comfortable? And then he dreams a most incredible dream. He had a dream. Here a ladder was set on the ground and its top reached to the heavens, and messengers of God were going up and down on it. And standing beside him was the Eternal, who said, I, the Eternal, am the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying I will assign to you and to your offspring. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. Remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I promised you. When he wakes up, he is awed by what he has experienced in his dreams and proclaims, Achen, yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh ve'anochi lo yadati. Surely God is in this place, and I did not know it. He is so struck by this encounter, this holy encounter, that he proclaims that this place must be the abode of God, and takes the stone on which he'd rested his head and anoints it as a marker, naming the site Beit El, literally the house of God. There is significant commentary on these verses, from questions about where exactly Jacob was sleeping. Jewish tradition holds that this is Mount Moriah, the same place where Abraham had nearly sacrificed Isaac, the place that would later become the focal point of the temple in Jerusalem. There are questions about how it was that he came to sleep in this exact place. Perhaps it was divinely determined. There are questions about the nature of his dream and God's promise. Why were the angels going up and then down? And questions about the peculiarity of Jacob's statement when he wakes up. Surely God was in this place and I did not know it. On the significance of the dream, the 12th century commentator Ibn Ezra suggests that there are places where miracles are seen. Sometimes in our lives, there are indeed places, and by extension, people, where and with whom amazing, miraculous, holy things happen. And of Jacob's wonder at not realizing this was a holy place, Rashi, the 11th century French commentator, imagines Jacob saying to himself, "For had I known it, I would not have slept in such a holy place." Modern biblical scholar Aviva Zornberg points out an important paradox here. She says, in Rashi's view, Jacob suffers a kind of guilt over not realizing this place was holy. But the paradox is clear, she explains. If Jacob had not slept, he would not have dreamed of God and angels, would not have received his first message from God, and would not know that this is indeed a holy place. Furthermore, she explains, the Midrash emphasizes God's wish that Jacob should sleep here. God shifts the scenes, alters the lighting, all for the purpose that the righteous man should sleep there. Whether there was something uniquely special about this place or not, I think many of us can relate to Jacob's experience of encountering something incredible and only realizing it after the fact, just how incredible and life-changing that moment really was. Think about it. Maybe it was a simple conversation with a friend or family member that shone a new light on a problem you were muddling over. Perhaps it was a bit of advice that led you down a different path than you might have imagined. Perhaps it was an experience on a trip that had some sort of profound, lasting effect on you. Jacob's story challenges us to ask, how do we recognize holy places and holy moments, especially when we're still in them? How can we try to become more attuned to the holiness in our everyday lives? How do we make sure that we don't let those moments or people that mean the most to us just slip by unnoticed? Much of Judaism and our Jewish traditions offer a system for trying to attune ourselves to holiness in our lives. We say blessings over food, over encountering things of beauty or wonder like rainbows or thunder or earthquakes. We sanctify time each week as we acknowledge the sanctity of Shabbat as a day of rest set apart from the other 6 days of the week. We sanctify the life cycle with rituals for welcoming new babies, with the coming of age, for relationships, and even for death. Over and over again, our daily liturgy and prayers try to ground us in a sense of gratitude, awe, and wonder for the gift of each new day, for our health, and for the people around us. The great modern Jewish philosopher Martin Buber bases his whole description of Jewish theology around the recognition of the holiness of certain moments and encounters in our lives. In his book, I and Thou, Buber explains that much of our lives are spent in what he calls I-it relationships, in which we relate to the people and things around us in transactional ways to serve some sort of purpose. Our cars get us from point A to point B. The cashier at the grocery store is there to bag our groceries. We have certain expectations, perhaps, for what our children will or won't achieve. But, argues Buber, something special takes place when we stop seeing people or even certain objects as serving us in some way, and instead simply relate to each other in a deeper, more meaningful way. Buber calls this the I-thou relationship, or the I-thou experience. In his writing, he tells the story of having an I-thou experience with his horse as a child. They shared a bond that was not about animal and rider, not about his feeding the horse, but simply a moment of quiet connection as he'd stroke the horse's mane and felt that connection as the horse responded to his presence. For Buber, this way of deeply relating to something or someone without thinking about the passage of time or what you might get from this interaction is a space in which God comes to dwell. Some of us have perhaps had a moment or two, if we're lucky, like these in our lives. An all-night conversation with a friend in which you lose track of time, or a moment of quiet connection with a loved one in which words might not have been spoken, but a closeness emerged. Or perhaps just sharing a sunset with someone special. Perhaps after having one of these moments, we might find ourselves saying, Adonai b'makom hazeh v'anochi lo yadati. God was in this place and I did not know it. But if we attune ourselves in the right way, we may discover that there is divinity to be found in more places than we've previously thought. If God is in this place, how will we know it? Shabbat shalom.